My name's Charli, I'm a disabled and queer activist, and last week I went to Edinburgh Fringe, so I'm here to tell you all about all the shows I saw and whether you should be seeing them or not. We saw 15 shows in the space of about 4 days, because at Edinburgh Fringe shows are only around an hour, so you can hop to quite a lot in a day. And when I asked on Instagram about how I should do this video, the majority said chronological, when I expected them to say best to worst or worst to best, so that's how we're going to tackle this. And we're just going to do a quick tour of what I saw and whether or not you should be seeing it. The very first show that we saw was Made in India / Britain, and this is a commentary all about a guy growing up being deaf and discovering his language, culture and community intertwined with being a person of colour and how those two communities come together and also clash. And it's a really fascinating piece. Rinku does it all in BSL, and then there's a guy that voiceovers for him, so it's obviously accessible to both deaf and hearing people, and you can also get captions on your phone at this one, which we did, and that's a really cool accessibility feature as well. I gave this 4 stars. I think this is one that you definitely should see if you can. Then we went to see Autistic License, and this is a comedy show by an autistic comedian called Ian, and this is such good fun. I always say comedy's not my thing, but autistic comedy is really good. Ian is brilliant. It's so funny all the way through, but he also covers massive amounts of the history of autism, autism discourse, the experience of being autistic in the space of an hour, and honestly hats off to him, because I don't know how I would ever be able to do that. This is definitely one that you should see. I gave it 4.5 stars. I think that Ian has done such a good job on this, and he really deserves this to go into the mainstream and for lots of non-autistic people to see it. Next up we saw Project Dictator, and this has got so many 5-star reviews, but it's a bit of a weird one. The first half is really good, it's really funny, it's a commentary on politics and politicians not actually doing what they say they're going to do, a bit about capitalism, a bit about anarchy, dictatorship and so forth. And the first half is so interactive. A guy in the audience had to draw what was going on, and considering how chaotic it was, did a great job. And then it descends into a clown show, literally, and the producers have basically said to a few reviews that said this was a bit weird, that it's meant to emulate like the fatigue of dictatorship, and I do understand that, but it went on for so long and it was just really dull by that point. I don't know, maybe I just didn't get it, but I only gave this 3 stars. I think this is a weird one. I think some people will really appreciate this and some people will find it to be 2 different shows in one, and that might not be your thing. It wasn't really mine. So that's definitely a make up your own mind kind of situation. Lastly, on the first day we saw Flatpack Furnished Flat. This was one of my picks. My partner did not want to see this one, but I did, and it's about a mother-daughter duo who are trying to move into a new flat, but their furniture hasn't arrived yet, and they have back and forth about their relationship, about their individual relationships with other people and how different they are. It's okay, but I think the characters are quite insufferable, and I think that is the point of them, but it's to that point where it's just slightly annoying, and I think that the twist that happened in it wasn't very effective. So I gave this 2.5 stars. I think it doesn't help that this one at Fringe is at 10 o'clock at night and finishes at 11, so I think by that point everyone is so tired, so I don't think that helps them. But yeah, I personally would say this is one to see if you're really into commentaries on relationships. So moving on to the next day, we actually had tickets to a different show that morning, and we just couldn't get there for various reasons. So we picked something out of the booklet at the venue we were at, and I'm really glad that we did. We saw Hot Wheels by Erin Simmons, and this is disabled comedy. Again, I said comedy's not my thing, but apparently when it's disabled people, it's relatable and it's really good. And Erin does a lot of commentary around his life experiences as a disabled person, a lot of stuff about non-disabled people and how they treat disabled people, a lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff about disabled toilets, for example, and some really good commentary on ambulatory wheelchair use, so the use of a wheelchair when you can walk short distances, that I think was really quite powerful. I gave this 4.5. I think this is a really great one to see. Erin just holds a crowd like so well and really reacts to the audience, and yeah, I just thought it was really good. So next up that day we saw Happy Meal, and I think this is most people's most anticipated show of Fringe. It's had so much press, and Tabby, who's the writer, is brilliant. This is all about trans discovery, trans love, trans joy, and it is gorgeous. It's all based through social media, and it really gets that across through the set, and the way the characters portray it, and it's just such a lovely little story, and it's really like such a lovely hour to sit through. So yeah, I gave this 4. I think that Tabby has done such a good job, and the actors should be so proud of themselves for portraying it. And it's all lived experience as well, writers and actors, it's all lived experience, and that is so important to me. So I think that was absolutely brilliantly done. On Wednesday we saw 4 shows at the same venue, so we were at Summer Hall for the whole day, and we actually were only going to see 3 shows, but then we managed to fit one in the gap that we had, and I'm really glad we did, but I'll come to that. So first up that day we saw Sap. This is my #1 must watch of Fringe that I saw. It is phenomenal. These 2 actresses, just brilliant. The first does a lot of monologuing and just really shows emotion, and like really portrays so much through what they're doing, and then the second takes on the role of all the other characters, and really manages to do that so well, considering that 2 of them are a brother and sister, who are very different people. There's a lot of focus on biphobia in the LGBTQ community, a lot of focus on abuse, and it is just enthralling. Like, I've never felt so captured by something, and I just think this is an absolute 5-star, and everyone should be seeing this. Writing gorgeous, acting gorgeous, just put this on your list. Next up that day we saw Rajesh and Naresh, and this seemed to have so much more potential for what it was. The storyline is all about 2 queer men of colour, and is all about them reconciling their identities, discovering their communities, discovering each other, falling in love, etc. And it's got some really lovely elements. I really enjoyed the use of props and costume and movement, but equally it felt like they were trying to do too many things at once. It's got some interpretive dance in it, like 45 minutes in, and because that hadn't been all the way through, it didn't quite feel right. And I think there were a few things in it like that that were just a bit jarring and meant that it kind of pulled itself back. So I gave this 3 stars, but I think it's got some really excellent commentary on being Asian and LGBTQ+. Next that day was the one that we slotted in the gap, and I'm really glad that we did. Like, just like Hot Wheels, which we saw randomly, this was one of my top shows of the whole week, and we saw Manic Street Creature. And this is gig theatre, so it's got songs all throughout, and for one, the songs are so beautiful. I think she said they're on Spotify, and I'm really hoping they are because I loved them. But it's got storyline running throughout it, and the main actress singer in this is phenomenal, like so emotive, and it's just such a beautifully done piece, and the other two musicians in it also so talented. It's a hard storyline, focusing on mental illness and medication and stuff like that, but if that's not something that triggers you, this is a must-see. It's absolutely gorgeous. So yes, definitely one to put on the list. Then finally at Summerhall we saw My Voice Was Heard But It Was Ignored, and this is a piece all about blackness and police brutality, and essentially a young person is facing police brutality at the start, and his teacher is there but ignores the situation, and then the rest of it is all about those two exploring why they take the actions that they do or don't take, and how that impacts the other, and try and really understand each other's experiences. And again, this is really well done. I gave this 4 stars. I think that it's really poignant and really, really insightful. The actors really got it all across, and you can really feel like how they're getting the trauma of it all across. So I would definitely put this on your list as one to watch. On to our last one that day, and we went to see Showstopper. And if you don't know what Showstopper is, it's an improvised musical, so I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Technically no one knows what they're getting themselves into because it's improvised, but you know what I mean. I wasn't really sure how this would go. I was like, surely, how good can an improvised musical actually be? But they are brilliant. So ours was called Do Not Pass Go, about a board game convention with songs in the style of Wicked, Cabaret, Grease and Hairspray, and I don't understand how they can do that. Like, they can just come up with it all on the spot. Cast, band, all excellent. This is definitely one to fit in, because you never know what you're gonna get. So you could go more than once. I will definitely go again if I can, elsewhere, because it's just such good fun. And they just do it so well. I don't understand how they do it, but it's brilliant. Definitely one to watch. That moves us on to our last day, and to start off our last day we went to see Head Girl, which is all about a girl who, unsurprisingly, wants to become head girl of her school. Now, I really wanted to love this. It's very Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging era. It's got a very naughty soundtrack with a sprinkling of Olivia Rodrigo. It's all about this girl who's, you know, very quirky, very focused, kind of reminded me of myself a little bit, but I think the issue is that there's not really that much of a storyline. There's not really like a moral at the end, or like a really like closing kind of idea. There were bits where it felt a bit pointless, like alongside Becca, the wanting to be head girl, there's the other actress, and she plays all the other different characters, one of which is her best friend who gets a boyfriend, and she reads out like a poem, and that bit felt very random and unneeded. So it was a bit of a weird one, mixed bag. I gave this 2 stars, but I think it's quite feel good for some people, and the soundtrack is really good. So ups and downs on that one. Then we went to see The Kettling, and this has a really young cast, and it's all about a climate change protest, climate justice, and unsurprisingly some young people being kettled. Considering how young they are, this cast is really, really emotive. I think it had a bit more potential. Some of the subplots felt a little bit underdeveloped, and some of the moments of solidarity felt a bit quick, but I think in general, like, this is really, really solid, and sends some really important messages. Then we went to see some of Amira, and I think this was only on for a handful of days, so I don't think you can see this anymore, which is gutting, but I'll talk about it anyway. I gave this 4 stars. This is Laurie's story of transitioning to be a trans man. It's all about trans masculine experience, and it's really, really powerful and vulnerable. I don't think I've ever seen a piece so vulnerable about the trans experience. Laurie applies testosterone gel on stage, and it's one of the most brilliant moments of theatre I have ever seen. I'm gutted that I don't think you can see this again, but I believe Laurie has said that there will be some Nottingham shows and a film at some point, so hopefully you will get to see it then. Finally, our last show of Fringe was Blue and Pip, and I gave this 4.5. This is another one that is excellent. This is a piece all about endometriosis and the experience of loving someone who has a chronic illness, being someone with a chronic illness, which obviously for me is like very, very relatable and important. These actors are excellent. There's some moments of awkward humour that just break it up and are really great. And I spoke to the actor who played Blue at the end, and they actually do have endometriosis, which is so important to me. I think lived experience is the most important thing. And also it's got non-binary rep in it and queer rep in it, and yeah, all in all, just such a good little show. Definitely a must watch. So overall, I think I'm going to give you 4 recommendations. Because I was going to do a top 3, but I want to do 4. So first up, Sap, Manic Street Creature, and then Blue and Pip, and then as a comedy to put in, go and see Autistic License, and learn so much about autism while laughing your head off. Yeah, that was my Fringe experience. Let me know if you've seen any of these shows, want to see any of these shows. If you've got any different opinions to me, if you have seen them, feel free to tell me them. And yeah, that's it for my first ever video. Hopefully this has been interesting or useful.